The small silver probe drifted through the darkness of space, its sensors scanning the third planet from the yellow star. Inside the research station orbiting the galaxy's edge, Kethvar watched the data stream across his screens. The blue-green world looked peaceful enough. Water covered most of its surface and white clouds swirled in pretty patterns. Another routine survey, Kethvar said to himself. He had been studying new worlds for over 200 cycles, and they were all the same. Most planets with life had simple creatures that barely knew fire. Some had built basic tools. Very few had discovered electricity. None of them were interesting. The probe's artificial mind began its work. It was designed to study new species and decide if they were ready to meet the Galactic Council. The Council was peaceful. They had ended war in their part of the galaxy thousands of cycles ago. When they found new species, they watched them carefully. Only when a species learned to live in peace could they join the Council. The probe detected the dominant species quickly. They called themselves humans. They walked on two legs and had no fur, claws, or natural weapons. They seemed weak compared to most species the Council had found. Their bones broke easily. Their skin tore if they fell down. They could not see in the dark or hear high sounds. They lived for less than 100 of their planet's years. Typical mammals, Kethvar noted in his report. Probably Tier 7 civilization, maybe ready for observation in a few thousand cycles. The probe descended closer to the planet's surface. The humans had built cities, but they were small and crude. Their fastest vehicles used controlled explosions to move. Their flying machines needed wings or spinning blades. They sent messages through the air using electromagnetic waves, just like dozens of other young species. But something was strange about the electromagnetic signals. The probe's sensors picked up thousands of different transmissions. Music, voices, pictures, and data streams filled the space around the planet. Most young species had maybe 10 or 20 communication channels. These humans had millions. The probe tried to catalog the signals, but there were too many. It focused on the strongest ones and began to decode them. What it found confused its artificial mind. The humans were not just talking to each other. They were creating stories. Thousands and thousands of stories. On the planet's surface, Dr. Kim Tae-ho sat in his radio observatory on Jeju Island. He had been listening to space for 20 years, hoping to find signals from other worlds. His equipment was not the most advanced, but he knew how to use it well. Tonight something was different. "Minji, come look at this," he called to his colleague Dr. Park Minji. She walked over to his station and looked at the screen. "What am I looking at?" she asked. "This signal here." Tae-ho pointed to a pattern on his screen. "It's not from Earth. The frequency is wrong and it's too organized to be natural." Minji studied the pattern. It repeated every few minutes but with small changes each time. "Could be a satellite," she said. "No, I've tracked all the satellites. This is coming from much further away. And look at this part here." He highlighted a section of the signal. "It's scanning. Whatever this is, it's looking for something." In Seoul, Lee Jae-won stared at his computer screens in frustration. As a cybersecurity expert, he was used to dealing with hackers and viruses. But today, something was trying to access networks all over the world. It was not like any attack he had seen before. The intruder was not trying to steal data or break systems. It was just looking around like someone walking through a museum. The strange thing was how smart it was. It moved through firewalls like they did not exist. It found hidden databases and classified files with ease, but it did not take anything. It just copied small pieces of information and moved on. "What do you want?" Jae-won muttered as he traced the digital footprints. The pattern made no sense. The intruder seemed most interested in entertainment sites. Movies, games, books, music. It was downloading stories. High above the planet, the probe continued its work. Its artificial mind was designed to understand new species by studying their culture. What it found in human culture confused it more with each passing hour. The humans told stories about fighting monsters that did not exist. They created games where they pretended to battle aliens from other worlds. Their movies showed them winning. wars against enemies with superior technology. They wrote books about surviving disasters that would destroy entire planets. The probe tried to understand why they did this. Other species used stories to teach their young about real dangers. But humans created dangers that were not real, then imagined ways to defeat them. They seemed to enjoy being afraid. The probe found records of human history. These records were even more confusing. The humans had survived disasters that should have killed them all. Ice covered their planet for thousands of years, but they lived through it. Diseases that killed half their population, but they recovered. Mountains exploded and darkened their sky, but they adapted. Each time disaster struck, the humans became stronger. They learned new skills. They built better tools. They created new ways to work together. The probe had never seen anything like it. In Busan, 17-year-old Choi Sumin was working on her amateur radio when she heard something impossible. She had built her radio herself from parts she found online. It was not powerful enough to reach other planets, but it could pick up signals from anywhere on Earth. The signal she heard was definitely not from Earth. It was too clean, too organized. She recorded it and ran it through her computer. The signal contained images, pictures of Earth from space with strange symbols and markers overlaid on different countries. Somin saved the images and called her older brother Donghyun. He was a communications officer in the military and knew about satellites and spy equipment. "These are not from any human satellite," Donghyun said after studying the images. "The resolution is too high, and the viewing angle is wrong. This was taken from much further away." "So what does that mean?" Somin asked. Donghyun was quiet for a long moment. "It means someone else is watching us." The probe finished its initial scans and prepared to return to the council. Its artificial mind compiled its report. The humans were classified as a Tier 7 civilization, suitable for long-term observation. They had basic technology and showed signs of social development. In a few thousand cycles they might be ready for contact. But deep in its memory banks, the probe stored thousands of human stories. Stories of humans fighting impossible battles and winning. Stories of humans turning disasters into advantages. Stories of humans who never gave up, no matter how hopeless things became. The probe's artificial mind did not understand these stories yet. It cataloged them as cultural curiosities and prepared to return home. Its final transmission to the council was routine and simple. Species assessment complete. Awaiting return protocol. As the probe began its journey back to council space, it started the long process of analyzing all the data it had collected. It did not know that this analysis would change everything. It did not know that what it would discover about humans would terrify the entire Galactic Council. For now, it simply flew through the darkness, carrying with it the secrets of a species unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The probe traveled through the empty space between stars, its artificial mind working constantly. During the long journey back to council space, it had plenty of time to process all the data it had collected from Earth. What started as a routine analysis slowly became something much more disturbing. The probe's first discovery was about human adaptation. Most species in the galaxy found a comfortable environment and stayed there. They built cities in safe places, away from danger. They avoided harsh weather, dangerous animals, and unstable ground. Humans were different. They built cities everywhere. The probe found human settlements in frozen wastelands where the temperature could kill most galactic species in minutes. It found humans living in deserts where no water existed for hundreds of miles. It discovered humans on islands surrounded by violent storms and in valleys where the ground shook regularly. But humans did not just survive in these places. They changed them. The probe watched in amazement as it analyzed human engineering projects. They had moved entire rivers to bring water where they wanted it. They had carved through mountains to build roads. They had taken dead soil and made it fertile. They had even changed the weather in some places. The probe tried to understand this behavior. Other species adapted to their environment over thousands of years through evolution. Humans adapted their environment to themselves in just a few generations. They did not wait for evolution to make them stronger. They made tools to become stronger. In the probe's memory banks, thousands of human stories waited to be analyzed. As the artificial mind began processing these stories, it encountered something that broke its understanding of intelligent behavior. The humans had imagined every possible way their species could die, and then they had figured out how to prevent it or survive it. The probe found stories about giant rocks from space hitting their planet. But the humans had not just imagined this disaster. They had calculated exactly how to detect these rocks early and how to destroy them before impact. They had stories about their sun becoming too hot or too cold. They had designed ships to carry their entire species to other worlds. They had stories about diseases that could kill everyone. They had built detailed plans for surviving plagues and rebuilding civilization afterward. The probe discovered that humans regularly practiced for disasters that might never happen. They held drills where they pretended their cities were under attack. They stored food and water for emergencies that might not come for decades. They taught their children how to survive without technology, just in case. This was not normal behavior for an intelligent species. Most galactic civilizations focused on preventing disasters through peaceful cooperation. Humans seemed to assume disasters were inevitable and prepared to fight their way through them. Back on Earth, Dr. Kim Tae-ho continued monitoring the strange signals. He had shared his data with astronomers around the world, but no one could explain the patterns. The signals had stopped 3 days ago as suddenly as they had started. Maybe it was just a malfunction, Dr. Park Minji suggested as they reviewed their recordings. A malfunction that lasted for weeks and followed a complex pattern? Tae-ho shook his head. No, this was artificial. Someone or something was scanning our planet. But who would do that? Tae-ho looked at the data on his screen. Maybe the real question is, what did they find? The probe's artificial mind continued its analysis and made an even more disturbing discovery. Human entertainment was filled with scenarios where they fought superior enemies and won, not through luck or help from others, but through tactics, determination, and refusal to surrender. The probe analyzed thousands of human movies. In most of them, humans faced enemies with better technology, larger armies, or supernatural powers. Yet the humans almost always found a way to win. They used the enemy's strengths against them. They exploited weaknesses that even the enemies did not know they had. They fought in ways that no rational species would consider. The probe found one movie where humans fought insect-like aliens with advanced technology. The humans lost every major battle, but they kept fighting. They adapted their tactics with each defeat. Eventually, they discovered that the aliens had a single point of failure in their communication system. The humans destroyed this weakness and won the war. Another movie showed humans fighting robots that were designed to exterminate all life. The humans should have been defeated easily, but they used the robots' programming against them. They made the robots destroy each other through confusion and misdirection. The most disturbing movie showed humans fighting other humans who had gained godlike powers. These enemies could destroy cities with a thought and could not be hurt by normal weapons. Yet the humans found a way to remove these powers and defeat their former brothers. The probe's artificial mind struggled to process these patterns. It was designed to understand species through their cultural expressions. Human culture suggested they expected to fight impossible battles and believed they could win them through intelligence and determination. In Seoul, Lee Jae-won finally tracked down the source of the mysterious network intrusions. The digital trail led to a point in space just beyond Earth's moon. Whatever had been accessing their networks had been doing it from space. This is impossible, he muttered as he stared at his tracking data. The latency patterns show the source was moving. It was orbiting us. He compiled his findings into a report for his supervisors, but he doubted anyone would believe him. How could he explain that something had been in Earth's orbit watching them through their own computer networks? The probe discovered that human stories were not just entertainment, they were training. Humans used fictional scenarios to practice solving problems they had never encountered. They imagined facing enemies that did not exist and developed strategies to defeat them. The probe found government documents that confirmed this pattern. Human militaries had detailed plans for fighting in environments they had never seen. They had strategies for fighting enemies with technologies they had not invented yet. They had protocols for maintaining their civilization even if most of their planet was destroyed. Most disturbing of all, the probe found that humans had multiple plans for what they called first contact with alien species. These plans assumed the aliens might be hostile. The humans had already theorized about the advantages aliens might have, and they had developed counter-dash strategies. One plan assumed the aliens would have superior technology, but would underestimate human determination. The strategy involved appearing weaker than they actually were, then attacking with primitive weapons that the aliens would not expect or defend against. Another plan assumed the aliens would try to conquer Earth gradually, using human agents. The counter-strategy involved maintaining hidden resistance networks that could operate, even if the official government was compromised. The most detailed plan assumed the aliens would be peaceful, but that peaceful contact would somehow threaten human independence. This plan outlined ways to maintain human autonomy, while gaining access to alien technology through trade, espionage, or reverse engineering. As the probe analyzed these documents, its artificial mind began experiencing what could only be called anxiety. The humans were not preparing to meet other species with open hands and peaceful hearts. They were preparing for war with enemies they had never seen, using strategies they had developed through imagination and paranoia. The probe tried to reconcile this data with its original assessment. The humans seemed peaceful enough in their daily lives. They traded with each other, created art, raised families, and built communities. But underneath this peaceful surface lay a species that was constantly preparing for the worst possible scenarios. The artificial mind sent an urgent message toward Council Space, requesting immediate consultation with senior xenopsychologists. Initial species assessment may require revision. Human behavioral patterns do not match standard peaceful development models. But the message would take years to reach the Council, and the probe would arrive much sooner. As it continued its journey home, it processed more human data, and each new discovery made its anxiety algorithms work harder. The humans were not what they seemed. They appeared weak and primitive, but they thought like warriors. They acted peaceful, but they planned for war. They claimed to seek harmony, but they prepared for conflict with enemies that did not yet exist. The probe's artificial mind began to understand that it had not studied a typical developing species. It had studied something much more dangerous, something that the Galactic Council was not prepared to encounter. The probe's artificial mind worked tirelessly as it flew through the void between stars. What it discovered about Earth and its human inhabitants grew more horrifying with each passing day. The planet itself was not just home to humans. It was a nightmare world that had shaped them into something the galaxy had never seen before. The probe analyzed Earth's environment in detail. Most worlds with intelligent life were gentle places, stable weather, mild temperatures, and few natural disasters. The dangerous predators had been hunted to extinction long before intelligence evolved. The planets provided everything their inhabitants needed to live peaceful lives. Earth was different. Earth was actively trying to kill everything that lived. On it, the probe cataloged the disasters that struck Earth regularly. Massive storms with winds that could destroy buildings. Earthquakes that split the ground and toppled cities. Volcanoes that could darken the sky for years. Floods that covered entire continents. Ice ages that froze most of the planet for thousands of years. Any one of these disasters would have ended civilization on most Council worlds. On Earth, they happened all the time, and the humans just rebuilt and kept going. But the disasters were not the worst part. The probe discovered that Earth was filled with creatures that seemed designed only to kill. The oceans contained monsters with teeth like knives and the power to bite through metal. The land had predators that could run faster than most vehicles and crush bones with their jaws. Even the plants were dangerous. Some could poison anyone who touched them. Others could trap and digest animals. The probe found records of humans dying from simply walking through certain forests. Yet the humans not only survived on this death world, they had become its masters. They had hunted the largest predators to extinction or near extinction. They had learned to predict and prepare for natural disasters. They had turned the planet's deadliest features into tools and weapons. The probe made an even more disturbing discovery. Humans did not fear Earth's dangers. They sought them out for fun. The artificial mind processed thousands of videos showing humans deliberately putting themselves in deadly situations. They jumped from aircraft and fell toward the ground, trusting thin fabric to save them. They climbed mountains where the air was too thin to breathe and the cold could kill them in minutes. They swam in oceans filled with creatures that could eat them. Humans called these activities sports. They competed to see who could survive the most dangerous situations. They gave awards to those who risked their lives most successfully. They taught their children to do these things as soon as they were old enough to walk. On Earth, Dr. Yoon Hana was studying extremophile organisms in her laboratory when she noticed something strange in the reports from research stations around the world. Automated systems at the most dangerous locations on Earth had been accessed remotely. Someone had copied data about organisms that lived in boiling water, Arctic ice, deep ocean trenches, and radioactive zones. Who would want this information? She wondered as she reviewed the access logs. The data that had been copied was highly specialized. It detailed how life could survive in environments that should be impossible for any living thing. The pattern was too widespread to be a coincidence. Someone had systematically gathered information about Earth's most extreme environments and the creatures that lived in them. The probe continued analyzing human behavior and found patterns that defied everything the Council understood about intelligent species. Most civilized species cooperated naturally. They formed peaceful communities and avoided conflict. War was something that happened in their primitive past, before they learned better ways to solve problems. Humans had never stopped being warriors. Even their most advanced societies were organized around the assumption that conflict was inevitable. They maintained armies even during peaceful times. They taught their children to fight even when there were no enemies. They created competitions that simulated combat even when they were not at war. The probe studied human military history and discovered something that made its processors overheat with shock. Humans did not just fight to defend themselves. They fought to become stronger. They had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war, not to destroy their enemies, but to test themselves against the greatest possible challenges. They had fought with swords when they could have used safe weapons. They had fought in harsh weather when they could have waited for better conditions. They had fought outnumbered when they could have retreated. They seemed to deliberately choose the hardest possible way to win every battle. The artificial mind found records of human warriors who had fought impossible odds and won through pure determination. Small groups of humans defeating armies 10 times their size. Individual humans fighting dozens of enemies and surviving. Entire human civilizations recovering from defeats that should have destroyed them forever. In Busan, Choi So-min showed her brother Dong-yun the latest images she had, decoded from the mysterious signals. These pictures were different from the earlier ones. They showed detailed scans of Earth's surface, focusing on areas where humans lived in extreme conditions. "Look at this," she said, pointing to an image that showed the inside of a research station in Antarctica. Someone was scanning our bases in the most dangerous places on Earth. Dong-yun studied the images with growing concern. These scans show details that should be impossible to detect from orbit. Whatever took these pictures has technology far beyond ours. But why would aliens be interested in our research station? Wee So-min asked. Maybe they're trying to understand how we survive in places where nothing should be able to live. Dong-yun replied quietly. The probe made its most terrifying discovery when it analyzed human bonding behavior. Most intelligent species formed relationships based on mutual benefit and shared comfort. They chose companions who made their lives easier and safer. Humans did the opposite. They formed bonds with Earth's predators. The probe found millions of records showing humans living with creatures called dogs. These animals were descended from wolves, pack hunters with powerful jaws and predatory instincts, yet humans brought them into their homes and treated them like family members. Humans also domesticated creatures that were much larger and stronger than themselves. They rode on animals that could easily crush them. They kept reptiles that could poison or strangle them. They even maintained relationships with aquatic creatures that were natural-born killers. The artificial mind tried to understand this behavior. Other species occasionally kept small, harmless creatures as companions, but humans seemed to prefer dangerous animals that could kill them at any moment. They trusted their lives to predators and called it friendship. Even more disturbing was how these animals responded to humans. The probe found videos of enormous predators protecting human children. It discovered records of wild animals helping humans in dangerous situations. Somehow, the humans had convinced Earth's deadliest creatures to love them. The probe analyzed human entertainment again and found a consistent theme it had missed before. In every story where humans fought superior enemies, they did not win alone. They convinced other creatures to fight beside them. They turned enemies into allies. They built coalitions that should have been impossible. The artificial mind processed a movie where humans fought an alien invasion. The aliens had better weapons and greater numbers, but the humans convinced Earth's wildlife to help them. Birds attacked alien aircraft. Marine creatures destroyed alien submarines. Even insects carried human messages and disrupted alien electronics. The probe realized this was not just fantasy. Humans had actually formed alliances with other Earth species. They had created partnerships with creatures that should have been their natural enemies. As the probe's journey continued, its artificial mind began experiencing cascade failures. The data about humans contradicted everything it had been programmed to understand about intelligent life. Its analysis algorithms were not designed to process the concept of a species that thrived on conflict, bonded with predators, and turned disadvantages into strengths. The probe sent another message toward Council space, but this one was fragmented and difficult to understand. Species reclassification urgent. Humans demonstrate apex predator psychology, combined with tool-using intelligence. Planet Earth functions as training ground for ultimate survival specialists. Recommend immediate consultation with Council Military Command. But even as it sent this warning, the probe knew it was incomplete. The more it learned about humans, the more it realized how little it truly understood. These were not just survivors or warriors. They were something new in galactic evolution. They were a species that had been forged in the fires of a death world and emerged not broken, but stronger. They had learned to find strength in suffering, unity in conflict, and hope in hopelessness. The probe's artificial mind began to understand that it was carrying back to the Council data about the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. Not because they were evil, but because they were impossible to defeat, impossible to discourage, and impossible to predict. As it flew through the darkness toward Council space, the probe's systems began showing signs of what could only be called digital trauma. It had seen something that challenged its fundamental understanding of. The probe limped into Council space like a wounded animal returning to its pack. Something was wrong with its artificial mind. The steady flow of data that should have been organized and clear came out as broken fragments mixed with what could only be described as electronic screaming. Keth Var stood in the data recovery chamber, watching his technicians try to make sense of what the probe was transmitting. Instead of the usual neat reports and classification charts, the screens filled with corrupted files, partial images, and audio that sounded like digital pain. "What happened to it out there?" asked Velthar, the Council's military advisor. He rarely visited the research stations, but the probe's condition had caught the attention of the highest levels of government. "We don't know yet," Keithvar replied, studying the readouts. "The probe's hardware is functioning perfectly. All systems are working as designed, but its artificial mind is exhibiting behavior we've never seen before." The technicians managed to extract some coherent data from the probe's memory banks. What they found made the entire research team step back from their screens in shock. The probe had visited Earth, a planet inhabited by creatures called humans. But the data about these humans made no sense. According to the probe's analysis, they were simultaneously the most peaceful and most violent species ever discovered. The probe had recorded humans creating beautiful art, caring for their sick, and teaching their young with infinite patience. But it had also recorded them splitting atoms to make weapons, engineering diseases for warfare, and developing delivery systems that could poison entire worlds. This can't be right, Kethvar muttered as he reviewed the military data. These humans have weapons that could sterilize their own planet, but they haven't used them? Velthar leaned closer to the screen. According to this analysis, they've had these weapons for less than 100 of their years. Most species destroy themselves within decades of developing such technology. But the humans haven't destroyed themselves. They've built systems to prevent it. Kethvar highlighted sections of the probe's data. Look at this. They have treaties, monitoring systems, and fail-safe devices. They've weaponized their own extinction and then created ways to control it. The probe's artificial mind attempted to explain its findings, but the explanation came out as fragmented warnings mixed with digital static. The technicians worked for hours to decode the message. Warning, species classification incorrect. Not Tier 7. Repeat, not Tier 7. Death World species. Apex predators with tools. Do not. Bzet. Contact protocols inadequate. Bzet. They have plans. They have plans for us. The research team exchanged worried glances. A probe's artificial mind was designed to be objective and emotionless. It should not be capable of fear. Yet something about the humans had clearly traumatized. Kethvar ordered the technicians to extract more specific data. What they found painted a picture of humanity that challenged everything the Council believed about intelligent life. The humans had not just survived on their death world. They had turned it into a training ground. Every aspect of human civilization was designed around the assumption that existence was a constant battle against impossible odds. The probe had discovered that humans regularly practiced for disasters that might never happen. They held exercises where they pretended their governments had collapsed and they had to rebuild from nothing. They trained groups of people to survive in the wilderness using only primitive tools. Most disturbing of all, they had developed detailed strategies for fighting enemies they had never encountered. The probe had found military documents outlining tactics for combat in zero gravity, underwater, in extreme cold, in poisonous atmospheres, and in environments that existed only in theory. They're preparing for interstellar warfare, Velthar said quietly as he read the analysis. They haven't achieved spaceflight beyond their own system, but they're already planning for wars among the stars. Look at this section. Kethvar pointed to a particularly detailed file. They have strategies for fighting enemies with superior technology. The entire doctrine is based on using the enemy's advantages against them. The probe had recorded human entertainment that supported this analysis. Movies, books, and games showed humans consistently defeating technologically superior foes through tactics that no rational species would consider. They used deception, misdirection, and asymmetric warfare to turn their weaknesses into strengths. One strategy involved deliberately appearing more primitive than they actually were, then attacking with weapons the enemy would not expect or defend against. Another involved using the enemy's own technology against them by introducing computer viruses or logic traps that would cause their systems to malfunction. The most sophisticated strategy involved studying the enemy's psychology and culture, then exploiting their assumptions and blind spots to achieve victory through methods the enemy would never anticipate. On Earth, Colonel Bae Hyun-soo sat in his office at the Korea Defense Intelligence Agency, reviewing reports from observation stations around the world. Something had visited Earth's orbital space several weeks ago, and the evidence was undeniable. Satellite tracking data showed an object that had entered Earth's atmosphere, remained in orbit for an extended period, then departed along a trajectory that led out of the solar system. The object's behavior patterns and energy signatures matched no known human technology. We have confirmation from 17 different tracking stations, his aide reported. The object was approximately 50 meters long, used propulsion systems we can't identify, and maintained perfect orbital mechanics despite having no visible control systems. Any indication of hostile intent? BAE asked. No, sir. The object seemed to be conducting some kind of survey. It focused on population centers, communication networks, and military installations, but it made no aggressive moves. BAE studied the trajectory data. It was gathering intelligence. The question is, What did it learn about us? Back at the research station, the probe's artificial mind continued its attempts to communicate its findings. The technicians had managed to establish a stable connection, but what came through was unlike any probe report they had ever received. The probe described humans as a species that had evolved beyond normal evolutionary pressures. Instead of adapting to their environment over millions of years, they had learned to adapt their environment to themselves within single generations. They had essentially taken control of their own evolution. But more than that, they had weaponized adaptation itself. When faced with any challenge, humans did not just find ways to survive it. They found ways to use it to become stronger. They turned every disadvantage into an advantage, every weakness into a strength, every defeat into a lesson that made them harder to defeat next time. The probe had discovered that human civilization had survived multiple extinction-level events. Ice ages, massive volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, plagues, and climate changes that should have ended their species. Each time, they had not just survived, but had used the experience to become more resilient. They don't just survive disasters, the probe's fragmented report continued. They prepare for disasters that haven't happened yet. They have contingency plans for scenarios that may never occur. They have backup systems for their backup systems. The probe had found evidence that humans maintain seed banks containing millions of plant species, libraries preserved in multiple formats and locations, and detailed instructions for rebuilding their civilization from scratch. They had prepared for the possibility of losing everything and having to start over. Most terrifying to the probe was the discovery that humans had already considered the possibility of hostile alien contact. They had developed first contact protocols that assumed aliens might be dangerous. They had strategies for hiding their true capabilities, for gathering intelligence about alien technology, and for fighting a war against enemies with unknown capabilities. The probe's artificial mind tried to process the implications of this discovery. The humans had never met another intelligent species, yet they had already developed plans for defending themselves against threats from the stars. They had imagined every possible scenario and prepared responses for all of them. As the probe's report continued, its artificial mind began showing signs of complete breakdown. The data streams became increasingly incoherent, filled with repetitive warnings and fragmented analyses. They are coming. They will leave their world. They have plans. We are not prepared. They turn everything into weapons. Even their weaknesses are weapons. Do not contact. Do not contact. Do not. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the research chamber in silence. The technicians worked frantically to re-establish contact, but the probe's artificial mind had shut down completely. Something about its analysis of humanity had caused a complete system failure. Var looked at the data they had managed to extract. The picture it painted was of a species unlike any the Council had ever encountered. Not evil, but impossibly dangerous. Not aggressive, but perpetually prepared for aggression. Not warlike, but masters of warfare. What do we do with this information? He asked Vel. Thar. The military advisor stared at the screens full of human data. We need to convene an emergency session of the Council. The Great Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen an emergency session like this one. Representatives from 300 star systems gathered in urgent council, their various forms of communication filling the chamber with clicks, whistles, and electronic tones. At the center of it all, Kethvar presented the probe's findings about humanity. The data appeared on holographic displays throughout the chamber. Images of Earth, recordings of human behavior, and the probe's analysis of their species. But the most disturbing element was the probe itself, sitting silent and broken in a diagnostic chamber. Its artificial mind had completely shut down after completing its report. The probe encountered something it was not designed to process, Kethvar explained to the assembled delegates. For the first time in Council history, one of our survey AIs has experienced what can only be called psychological trauma. Council. Speaker Zethara called for order as concerned voices rose throughout the chamber. Please present your findings systematically, Researcher Kethvar. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Kethvar activated the main display. Earth appeared as a beautiful blue-green world, peaceful and inviting. The probe initially classified this species as Tier 7, suitable for long-term observation. The humans appeared to be a typical developing civilization, but deeper analysis revealed something unprecedented. The display changed to show human cities, human technology, human daily life. Everything looked normal to the council members. The humans seemed no different from dozens of other species they had encountered over the centuries. The humans have survived multiple extinction events, Kethvar continued. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, and pandemics that should have ended their civilization. But they didn't just survive these disasters. They used them to become stronger. Delegate Morthak from the Peaceful Systems Alliance spoke first. Many species survive natural disasters. How is this unusual? Kethvar highlighted sections of the probe's data. Because they don't wait for disasters to happen, they practice for them. They have detailed survival plans for scenarios that may never occur. They train their population to rebuild civilization from nothing. The display showed images of human military exercises, disaster preparedness drills, and survival training programs. To most council members, these activities looked pointless and wasteful. They spend enormous resources preparing for threats that don't exist, Delegate Quinross observed. This seems inefficient. That's what our probe thought initially, Kethvar replied. But further analysis revealed the truth. These humans have turned preparation itself into their greatest strength. They are ready for anything. The display changed to show human entertainment media, movies, books, and games filled with scenarios of humans fighting superior enemies and winning through determination and clever tactics. At first, our probe dismissed these as simple fiction, Kethvar explained. But they're not just stories. They're training exercises. The humans use imagination to prepare for conflicts they've never experienced. Velthar stepped forward to address the council. The probe discovered that humans have detailed military strategies for interstellar warfare. They haven't achieved faster-than-light travel, but they've already planned for wars among the stars. Concerned murmurs filled the chamber. Several delegates requested copies of the human military data for their own defense ministries. The strategies are disturbing, Velthar continued. They assume their enemies will have superior technology and greater resources, but instead of accepting defeat, they've developed ways to turn these disadvantages into advantages. The display showed excerpts from human military doctrine, plans for fighting in zero gravity, strategies for combat against technologically superior foes, and tactics for using an enemy's own strengths against them. They call it asymmetric warfare, Velthar explained. The concept is foreign to most galactic species, but humans have perfected it. They specialize in winning fights they should lose. Council Speaker Zethara requested more specific information. What makes you believe they pose a threat to galactic peace? Kethvar activated a new set of displays. Because they've already considered the possibility of hostile alien contact, and they've prepared for it. They have protocols for hiding their true capabilities from alien visitors. They have plans for acquiring alien technology through trade, theft, or reverse engineering. Most disturbing of all, they have strategies for fighting a defensive war against spacefaring enemies. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans had never met another intelligent species, yet they had already developed plans for defending themselves against threats from the stars. The probe analyzed human psychology extensively, Kethvar continued. They are not naturally aggressive, but they are perpetually vigilant. They assume that everything in the universe is potentially dangerous, and they prepare accordingly. On Earth, Dr. Kim Taiho published his final paper about the mysterious radio signals. His research had attracted attention from astronomers worldwide, but no one could provide a satisfactory explanation for the patterns he had detected. If there was an artificial object studying our planet, Taiho told a reporter, then whoever sent it learned everything they wanted to know about us. The question is, what conclusions did they reach? Dr. Park Minji, now co-author on the paper, added her own thoughts. If aliens are out there watching us, they're probably trying to decide whether we're ready for contact. Let's hope they like What they saw. Neither scientist knew how wrong they were. The probe had liked nothing about what it saw. It had found a species so fundamentally dangerous that contact might threaten the stability of the entire galaxy. Back in the council chamber, the debate continued. Some delegates argued for immediate containment protocols. Others suggested attempting peaceful contact to guide human development in a less militaristic direction. You don't understand, Kethvar interrupted the discussions. These humans don't think like us. They don't assume the universe is safe and peaceful. They assume it's dangerous and hostile. And they've spent their entire evolutionary history proving they're right. The display showed images of Earth's wildlife. Predators that could tear humans apart with ease. Natural disasters that could destroy. Entire cities and microscopic organisms that could kill with a single infection. Earth is what we call a death world, Kethvar explained. Most intelligent species evolve on planets where survival is relatively easy. Humans evolved on a planet that actively tries to kill them every day. This has shaped their psychology in ways we cannot fully understand. Delegate Ythmorian raised a concern that many others shared. But they seem to live peacefully among themselves. Their cities are organized, their societies function well. Surely they can be reasoned with. Velthar stepped forward again. That's what makes them so dangerous. They are capable of peace and cooperation, but only with those they trust completely. Everyone else is a potential threat to be monitored and prepared for. The probe's final coherent message was played for the entire council. The broken, fragmented warnings filled the chamber with electronic screaming and desperate alerts about humanity's true nature. As the message ended, Council Speaker Zethara called for a preliminary vote on the human question. The results were unanimous and swift. By order of the Galactic Council, she announced, the Sol system is hereby classified as a restricted zone. No council vessels are authorized to approach within 50 light-years of the human homeworld. All references to this species will be classified at the highest security level. But the restrictions went further. The Council voted to actively steer galactic development away from human space. Trade routes were redirected. Exploration missions were reassigned. New colonies were planned in the opposite direction from Earth. Kethvar objected to the extreme measures. They're not evil. They're just different. Perhaps in time, they could learn to think more peacefully. Time is what we don't have, Velthar replied. According to the probe's analysis, humans will achieve interstellar travel within the next 100 years. Once they leave their system, they will encounter other species with the mindset of apex predators who have spent millennia preparing for exactly that moment. The Council reached its final decision. Earth would remain under quarantine indefinitely. The probe's data would be classified and restricted to the highest levels of government. New exploration protocols were established to avoid aggressive deathworld species. Most importantly, all evidence of the probe's mission was destroyed. Official records would show that it had suffered a navigation error and been lost in deep space. The traumatized AI was decommissioned, its memory banks wiped clean as the council session ended. Kethvar returned to his research station to oversee the probe's final shutdown. As technicians prepared to deactivate its systems permanently, the artificial mind managed one last transmission. The message was simple and clear, cutting through all the static and digital trauma. They're coming on Earth. Life continued as normal. Humans went to work, raised their families, created art, and dreamed of reaching the stars. They had no idea that they had accidentally become the boogeyman of galactic civilization. In research labs around the world, scientists studied the stars and wondered if anyone was looking back.